So here are some tips, the things that you can be doing all the time, not just when you're being attacked, to stay secure. And number one on the list is something that Brian just mentioned. Don't use your company login credentials at third-party websites. I'm going to put in parentheses here, unless you have to, right? Because that third-party website could have a data breach and expose your credentials to the world. Now, there are a few exceptions to that. Let's imagine that your company contracts with a third-party payroll company or a third-party tax preparation company, and you get your W-2s from them every year, and you have to use your company email address as your login ID. Well, in that case, you have to, but don't use the same password. Like Brian said, use a different password than you use anywhere else, even if you're forced to use your company login credentials on some third-party website.
Could you
again?
Talk,
I think
I know I'm derailing you some.
Go ahead.
Could you talk a little bit about single sign-on and when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate, what that really takes? I know it's a term that not everyone knows the full implications of single sign-on and how complex that can be, but what the benefits of it really are.
So the first thing is that it's kind of self-evident, right, with a name like single sign-on. So in short, what it means is that you can use your company login to automatically get logged into other applications or other companies' systems without you having to stop and put your credentials in, right? So you log into your computer in the morning one time, and then when you click on an icon to open an application, or you click on a website to go to a particular website, if your IT department has pre-configured those applications or those websites to work with single sign-on, then they will securely send your login information to that application or to that website so that you don't have to log in again. So it's super convenient for you. You don't have to remember 3 passwords. You only have to remember 1. And it is reasonably secure because this only happens when your IT department has set it up, right? You can't go out and create single sign-on for yourself, right? So single sign-on is super convenient, but once your credentials are compromised, if perchance you were to give away your credentials, now anyone who has that one login will have access to any application that single sign-on is set up for, and any website that single sign-on is set up for. So single sign-on is a great thing, but it makes your credentials more valuable when your company has set things up for single sign-on. Is that good enough, Brian?
I think so. And I think just pointing out, and this is my opinion, I'm interested if you feel the same way. If you're at that point where you're unsure of whether you want to do MFA or not, do not do single sign-on to the point that you just made. Yes, single sign-on will help you to not have to remember all these different passwords. But if you get compromised, now everything that you're attached to is going to get compromised too. So MFA really has to be the place that you start there.
Right. So be vigilant all the time. I'm not going to beat that dead horse. We've talked about it a lot. But here is an additional one. Don't install, we call it grayware, on any company devices, and don't work from devices that your kids use. So I'm sure you have seen in the news, you might not be able to see it. I'm going to hold up my phone to the camera. Stories about how millions or hundreds of millions of, we'll call them Android devices for the moment, although it can happen with iPhones also. Some common software program that lots of people love and use was discovered to have malware embedded in it, and the bad guys, often China, have been capturing information from you because you installed this little application, right? It could be something as simple as, the calculator program that Google gives me on my Android device isn't very good, but there's this other calculator program that I like a lot better. I'm going to download and install that calculator program, right? Well, if that calculator program has, malware embedded in it, right, then the bad guys are going to be able to get lots of information off of your company device or your own personal device that you use for company purposes. So you really, really should not do that. Only install approved applications and not any others. And we talk about that. And don't work from devices your kids use, right? If your kids are on the internet and visiting tons and tons of websites and playing lots of games and doing unknown things on the home computer, then you are at risk because there could be malware on that device, and you try and log in to a company service, right? And your credentials can be harvested by that device. When you are working from a personal device, but you're trying to do company work, which is very common, it's the most common way these days, bring your own device, right? Make sure you don't save protected information like logins or client data directly on the device itself, so that if that device ever does get compromised, corporate data is not exposed there. Another thing you can do is use web versions of tools whenever possible. So for example, instead of installing an email app to get corporate data or using the native email app on your phone, you can just open up a web browser. Like if you are a Microsoft customer, you can just go to outlook.office.com, right, inside the web browser. And that will make sure that anything you do and see isn't being stored locally on your device. So if you can, use web versions of tools whenever you can. As I said previously, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call a trusted person, right? Because there are many legitimate circumstances when you're going to get an email from one of your vendors and it's going to say, our banking information has changed. That's no problem. There just needs to be a formal process that everyone follows all the time to validate that information. No changes can be made without talking directly to a trusted person and confirming that the information you received is the correct information. And you can do it very easily and securely. You can say, hey, John, I received this email from you saying that there was new bank account information and the last 4 digits are 1119. Is that correct? And John goes, yes, that's correct. Then it's legit, right?
I would just call a known phone number. Another thing I've seen is they get that fraudulent invoice and they change the phone number, obviously, so that if you do call to verify, you call the number that's on that invoice. And
right.
Unfortunately, I've seen that happen a couple of times as well.
Yep. Look at this last bullet point right here. If someone is wanting information from you, don't call the number that's listed in the email and don't reply directly, right? Go find a correct number or from your own records or from a colleague, right? Find a correct number and make sure you're calling the correct company. I have to tell you that my own mother kind of fell for one of these when this error popped up on her screen and it said, this is Microsoft, you need to call us right away at this phone number. And she picked up the phone and she called who she thought was Microsoft. And she talked to them for like an hour on the phone. And she didn't get suspicious until they asked her for a credit card number. They said, hey, we're going to have to charge you for this service. Please give me your credit card. And at that point, she decided, nah, this isn't legit. And she hung up. Thank goodness. Right. And then, of course, she called me and I had to check out her machine and make sure they hadn't done anything bad. So it came out all okay. But don't call any phone number that someone offers you. Go find a correct phone number and call it yourself.